Pick me up. You got to pick me up. Now I'm falling down. You're going to pick me up. Yes. Yeah, this is what happens when you forget to post about it on Sunday. Nope, not so far. I mean, because that means so much. Like, this really is just about the video on demand. Well, today I'm going to talk a little bit about what happened with smolz while his player Beth was out for 2 sessions, or I guess, yeah, 2 sessions, and then getting into the fortress, first major real combat in there, all kinds of good stuff. Let me see if I can find. Probably should have done this before, but that would be intelligent and helpful and doing things ahead of time. But way back April, probably before April. March? No, I feel like it was before March that we did this. When was that session approximately? Searching through text, searching through so much text. January? No, that sounds like way too long ago. Wait, it's June. So yeah, it had to be like March. I mean, at the earliest. We did skip a lot of weeks, though. Maybe not. Maybe it was back in January. Hmm. Hmm. Oh, yeah. So when, by the way, everyone should probably just, well, I suppose saying it now doesn't really help. I will put a thing in the video on demand so that people can just skip right now to where I'm actually talking about stuff. So yeah, so in between the first, second, and now third session, Beth and I texted back and forth. This was not consistent. It was I would send a thing, she would send a thing hours later, back and forth. It took a while, but we kind of got through a scene that way. And this can be a really useful way to communicate with your players outside of session and continue some sort of character building, or in this case, character existing. If you remember the last thing that we saw of smolz, he was in a cart with Matt being loaded back to town, and as Matt looks off toward the sunrise, suddenly smolz is gone. Now, smolz being a very small halfling, that doesn't really mean much, but she was definitively gone. Looked, searched everywhere, couldn't find him. Well, as As you can imagine, it's because I stole him away to do a little extra thing. Now, the rest of the players met Pelor and Melora, and they were given power by those gods. Well, smolz, not so much. Um, so the text started with you find yourself alone in a black void. And a voice chimes in your head. Oh no, little one. This conversation is just for the two of us. And he, just responds like, "Shit, what's going on?" Um, and the voice again inside his head. You are a clever one, and I clearly have chosen well. Your friends are being confronted by cousins of mine right now, but I think you are meant for something different than a shining beam of sunlight or the wilds and ferocity. Well, when you're small, clever's all you got. I, and at that, the stars in this black void suddenly alight and form themselves into a shape alike a man, but formed off, ambiguous. Is this truly a bipedal creature? Is it not? What are you truly seeing here? And at that speaks again, am called the Two-Faced, the Wanderer, the Knife in the Dark. You may call me Olid Amara, or my lord if you're feeling fancy. To which my sister, in all of her wonderfulness, just says, "Ollie, nice to meet you." She's playing this character exactly the way that it that fits perfectly. Um, excuse me, my lord. Your friends have been greeted and offered a choice. They will likely accept. You will not be offered one. I do not believe in offering that which may be refused. You could always give me an opportunity to play good little soldier before you just decide for me, unless you can read my mind. Yes, Casmo, I can read your mind. You are uncomfortable. You are not used to grandeur except of your own being, and you feel a bit parched. So, you are going to leave my realm with my blessing, and find your voice not only enhanced, but beyond the kin of your mortal thought. Your words will cause minds to change, your cadence shall march armies, and your lullabies shall lay even the fiercest of beasts to a rest that they cannot wake from. And even if you try not to, you will do this in my name. She then responds, "Well, how do you like to be praised? Because, I'll get chance happening if that's a jam, or maybe just using it more frequently than I normally would. Ooh, ooh, ooh. No, I bet you like it when only ladies or dudes, whatever you feel, no shame here, scream your name. I can hear it now. Ali, Ali, Ali. No, no. Your deeds shall be enough. I remain in the shadows. I shall reveal myself as necessary to make my presence known." All right, man, you got it. Don't got to tell me twice, but before you go, are you able to tell me if my friends are okay? Did they make the right choice? Well, right is much more a matter of perspective. I am widely considered to be wrong, for instance, but I would say you believe them to have made the right choice. At that, you feel your vision blur and the stars fade into a noonday sun. You hear one last phrase in your head. Oh, and don't trust the king. At that, Casmo or Smalls finds himself back in the normal world. Well, that is where our players were resting. Nearby the entrance to the Goblin Fortress, last session they had thrown the effective Molotov cocktail in, burned down some timber, killed some goblins with it, and suddenly smolz is there. One moment they turn, and there he stands. This time resplendent, of course, as they all gained gear and that first level in their class. Casmo gained the same. But with his back is this bronzed cloak with a design on the inside of stars that seem to twinkle, even though you could swear that no fabric would be able to do that. Now, this is another kind of test for this world, something that I tried this time around. I wanted to make the idea of being God touched, of being holy warriors, whatever that should mean for an individual creature, mean something and have a definable characteristic. And my answer was bronze. Bronze being, what we kind of equate with ancient, with, something from ages past, from eons beyond our minds. So, them having something bronze on them suddenly means something. People will see them and know them to be God touched, to be exceptional, and to be blessed and booned by something beyond, this mortal realm. So, of course, Casmo appears. Everyone is overjoyed. Matt is happy to have his friends back. Everyone is just beyond excited. There's a little bit of sharing. Oh, where were you? Well, where were you? Where are we? What's going on? That took a bit of time, which is, I believe, also very important. I think it's very important for your players to recontextualize events in their own words, in their own feeling. What is actually happening from your perspective is very different from your players. Oftentimes at the beginning of the session, I point to one person and say, recap last session. And usually it's just a die roll. It's a random thing, because that also means that I get to hear what they actually value. Not just one person. That one person can be nice, but I want to hear how you all actually remember things. And sometimes that means someone just reads off a list of words that they wrote down from the last session. Okay, I have written down barren, evil, combat, death, poison, luck, ? And that's it. And that's fine. Maybe other players will interject and add in their own little thing to go on top of that. But what's important is to notice how your players really remember and contextualize events, because sometimes it can be a whole thing. Suddenly they remember something that maybe they had forgotten in the last week, especially if you don't play super frequently, every 2 weeks, every month. A lot of groups live in that sort of situation, especially groups of more older people who have more responsibilities. So you have to do something to kind of jog their brains, because it's been a little bit. But just telling them what happened oftentimes is only what you remember, and B, can make them feel very talked to instead of remembering. It really makes your players feel something. So after that, they've all met back up again. The whole crew is together. We're heading back to the Goblin Fortress. If you remember before, there are 6 little holes out of which we're poking crossbow bolts before, and there's one larger but still relatively small hole at the bottom, just high enough off the ground that a small creature, like a goblin, for instance, could climb into and could stand in. But a medium-sized creature would have to crawl. So they are, listening and trying to figure out if there's anything in there. They don't see any crossbow bolts like before, and so they crawl in. They enter into a relatively dark. There is some light, but it's really out from underneath a doorway. And they see an iron door that leads further into the fortress. Now, this whole area where they originally entered, they got to crawl through 30 feet because most of them are going to be medium size. And then get into a little hallway that splits off into these two hallways that lead up to the scaffolding. The scaffolding's gone, lit on fire, and the goblins are finished as well. So they didn't really deal with that. They looked around for a second, nothing of use. Cool, let's move on. So they find this metal door, and on the other side, and this is one of those important things, is what needs to be left to a die roll and what needs to be just told. I think this is something that needs to be told. You can hear raucous laughter and carousing, partying, for lack of a better word. And you can hear lots of different voices. Now, that's where I call for a perception roll. The perception roll is not, do you hear it? Can you tell there are lots of creatures on the other side? Can you tell an exact number, and is it accurate? So someone who gets close will be able to tell, it's somewhere between 10 and 20. Someone who gets right on it or heavily above, be able to tell, it's 12 to 15 or 14, exactly 14. Or someone who does very poorly could say, it's more than 3 and less than 30. The difference between those is huge. But can you tell? The answer is no. If that's the answer, then that's the answer. There's nothing wrong with that. Typically, I do allow all players to roll this. It increases the chances of someone getting a little closer, and there's nothing wrong with that, with them having at least some idea of what they're walking into. Because what they're walking into could be a deadly encounter. It is a lot of goblins, though they are heavily inebriated and not ready for your assault. So they open the door and throw in a bunch of these, oil flask Molotov cocktails that they had made before, light some spaces on fire. They then kind of got a realization of just how many goblins there are here. And it worked. That fire did something, but not much. There's a lot of people, and it's a big space. The room that they're going into, if I remember correctly, is about 100 feet by 50 feet. So 20 by, no, that sounds, it's 50 feet by like 20 feet. Yeah, because it's like 10 by 5 squares, which is a lot. That's 50 squares. And 14 creatures in there, so there's a lot of empty space there. And even though these goblins are drunk and or high and or both, they're not stupid. They're not just going to throw their lives away for no reason, so they go running. In this room, there is a door to the east and a door to the north. Now, the goblins don't know this, and the players don't either, but the door to the east is locked. The goblins just go running. Some of them are, crazed, inebriated, so they run at the players. But some of them just go running to the north. And this is where combat really got started. This is where, your players have to think a little bit. Not saying that they couldn't just rush in here and have no problem at all. The goblins are not equipped. They have crappy knives that are probably kind of rusty. I think I lowered their damage by a good amount. And you have advantage to hit them because they're just so inebriated, and they have disadvantage on all saving throws. But I gave them, I think, a little bit more hit points. So they are not an easy foe, especially in this big of numbers. If you just run in, get yourself surrounded. It could be deadly. But luckily, most players are a little bit smarter than that. So they just stand by the door. Sunshine in front with her plate armor and high hit points and high damage, with smolz right behind, darting into her space, attacking and backing back out, with Urza providing a little bit of magical support. She puts down an entangle by the door to the north to stop them from being able to get out. And Matt with a whip just reaching over the top, and of course Taco firing arrows. So it worked out great. They really had a good funnel going where they really had 2 or 3 goblins to deal with at a time out of 14. The problem was a little bit just pure numbers. It took a while, you know. But that's kind of what you got to do when you're clearing a dungeon. You have to clear it room by room. You can't just leave some. They did mess up a little bit. One goblin did end up getting out and runs to the north. He got out of the entangle and then managed to run to the north. And at the last moment, perfect little opportunity. The goblin to the east is trying to pull on the door, only to realize that it's locked. And the players finally finish it right off. It was a great little moment of, this comedic, let me out, slack. Wonderful little fight. And that was last time I talked a little bit about how we ran a danger room scenario, a kind of quick combat to get them used to fighting, used to their new characters with their new abilities. This was the first real test. This was, okay, you're in this situation. What are you going to do? And how are you going to get out of it smartly, safely, and with a little bit of care? Now, I did mention before, these players are a little bit more risk averse than I typically like, and this is part of that. But, that's part of some groups. They are just incredibly risk averse. That was most of the session, honestly. After that, they got to unlocking the door to the east. They said, okay, these goblins ran to the north. They look through the door to the north, and all they see is a dark hallway. About 80 feet into the hallway, they see some light. They see some torches hanging on the wall. But they don't know what's in the meantime. And they say, okay, let's just close the door here, and we'll come back later. So they unlock the east door and bust in. And what do they see? They see a chapel, for lack of a better word, a goblin chapel. Pews, lining up on 2 sides of the room, and on the other end, an altar with a set of 3 goblins, one in the center wearing red and gold robes, and 2 on either side wearing black robes. And they can tell that the one in the center seems to be a little bit more powerful, a little bit more well honored within the tradition of Maglubiet. Maglubiet being the goblin god of, many things, mostly just goblinoids in general. And so they see that, and they see on the altar 4 things. 3 symbols. First, a head, a skull, made of leaves and vines, kind of in the style of a goblin, with these big long ears that kind of go straight out, and a long chin that comes down. Then a white skull, pure white, literally gnawed to the point where it's pure bone. And then through that is a spike, and there is a symbol on the temple drawn into it, and then a crossed small sword. Like you wouldn't call it a dagger because it actually looks like a small sword and a small axe crossed. Some of them made their religion checks, namely Taco and Sunshine, and they recognize these three symbols. They recognize they recognize two of the symbols. The skull is a symbol of frack. Now I forget the name of the gods. Really, one of the bugbear gods, god of alertness and of might, and then the crossed sword and axe are a symbol of the hobgoblin god, a god of honor and bravery. But honor is a much twisted version. Honor in slaughter, honor in the well-being of your people at the expense of others. For how can you be well if others exist? And then the goblin head, they actually explicitly don't recognize, and it seems odd to them that they don't. But that we'll get to next time. Obviously, a pretty short video this week, not much to go over. It was kind of a short session, kind of a weird session. Most of it was taken up with planning. There was a lot of, can we go in? Is it safe? What's going on? Listening at the door. Okay, what are we going to do? What's the plan? There's a bunch of goblins in there. How are we going to do it? How are we going to go in? It was very... This was probably one of the worst sessions I've ran in a while, for the pure fact of I didn't accelerate player action when it was just chitter chatter. Sometimes you have to reward good ideas in some way. Inspiration. Hey, that's a good idea. Give someone a role to say, that thing you said earlier, I think that's a good plan. But that can be a dangerous road as well. Do you tell them it's a good idea? If you tell them it's a good idea, well, now you've endorsed it. Now you, the person who knows everything, who made this world, who made these encounters, who knows how this is all vaguely going to work, you've endorsed a plan. That means it's the right decision. And we don't like right decisions. We like fraught decisions. Is this the right way to go? Are we going to be okay? Sometimes the answer is, who knows? And I think that's one of the lessons that I learned with this group, and that I need to be better at, is rewarding good ideas so that they are then enacted. Because if you reward someone, they might say, hey, that was probably a good idea, and keep going with that. They kept going with the fire flask because it worked so well, and that certainly wasn't a bad plan. The problem was it came them so long to get to it. They had to debate and they had to argue every little moment, every little second of how is this going to go? How are we going to get through? How are we going to survive? So that was really my big takeaway from this session and from this campaign in general, was I need to be better about rewarding my players in some way or another, and getting them to come to good ideas. Well, almost 30 minutes. I think the shortest one I've done in a while, but like I said, this is kind of a weird session. Next week, be back 7 p.m. Tuesday, of course. We'll get into the combat with the goblinoid priests or shamans, which was absolutely spectacular. Really, I think one of my best magic-y fights. Magicians who are actually doing interesting things. And then them getting just smacked in the face by some bugbears. So we'll go from there. Have a wonderful week. We'll talk later. Have a good night.